Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And now we'll return where we left off in the book, A Woman Rides the Beast by Dave Hunt, exposing Mystery Babylon. What does the Bible speak of when it speaks of Mystery Babylon, the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth? In this portion of the chapter is entitled Roots of a Modern Delusion, and Dave Hunt says, Satan's promise to Eve that she could become one of the gods became the foundation of pagan religion worldwide. To achieve that goal, man would have to assert himself and labor mightily. Thus was born the religion of self-effort. In fact, works instead of grace has always been and still is the religion of which Roman Catholicism is the prime example. The rising Tower of Babel seemed to give credence to the grandiose delusion, the grand delusion, that man could reach heaven by his own efforts. Nimrod was very likely the first emperor to be deified, and thus was a forerunner of Antichrist. As a matter of fact, I regard him as the prototype of the papacy today, the papacy being the modern-day Nimrod. Everything that you found, or everything that you find in Nimrod, you find in spades in the papacy today. Now, beginning where we left off at the top of page 58, if you're following along in the book, Babel, and the city of Babylon, later constructed around her ruins, was the cradle of the belief in a quote-unquote higher destiny for all mankind. Later, that dream would be limited to special races, such as the Aryans, a claim which Adolf Hitler's Nazism would pursue to the destruction of 6 million Jews. Echoing the serpent's lie, Hitler would say, quote, Man is becoming God. We need free men who feel and know that God is in themselves, unquote. The Jews, however, were not men at all in Hitler's estimation, but Untermenschen, in other words, subhumans, who he determined to exterminate for the good of the Aryan race. Hitler's theory of the quote-unquote purity of blood, which he sought to maintain through extermination of the Jews, which ran unopposed by the Vatican, by the way, had its roots in ancient occultism involving a mythical Nordic Garden of Eden in the north, known as Hyperborea. There, an Aryan race of god-men had allegedly been spawned by gods visiting Earth. Nietzsche, whose writings heavily influenced Hitler, began his key work, Antichrist, with the sentence, quote, Let us see ourselves for what we are. We are Hyperboreans all, unquote. It was the lie of the serpent from the Garden of Eden once again. Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Peter Weyrich finds the roots of the Nazi dream of a master race of god-men ruling the world not only in Hegel and Nietzsche, but in Wagner and a host of romantic writers who all echoed the serpent's lie to Eve. The following excerpt is from the 1940 conclusion of Weyrich's remarkable book, Metapolitics, The Roots of the Nazi Mind, an ending which the original publisher refused to include as being too extreme, but which hindsight now reveals was amazingly accurate. Quote, Mein Kampf was a bestseller long before the German people. Voting uncoerced in the free Reichstag election of September 1930 increased the Nazi seats from 12 to 107 and made them the biggest party in Germany. By then, Hitler said in Mein Kampf, to pick a typical thread at random, quote, If at the start of World War I we had held under poison 12 or 15,000 of these Hebrew subverters of our people, then the sacrifice of 1 million Germans at the front would not have been in vain. The timely elimination of 12,000 bums. The German enigma is just what kind of behavior could those millions of pro-Hitler voters from 1930 on expect of the monster mentality that composes such held-under threats? His book is no classified secret document. Millions of Germans own it. A few must have browsed in it. These few must have included some of the cheering public and also some influential dignitaries with access to press, radio, and other means of warning the public. Someday, the same Germans now cheering Hitler's strut into Paris will say, quote, "We did not know what went on," unquote. And when that day of know-nothing comes, there will be laughter in hell, unquote. They said Adolf Hitler was chosen of God. The Roman Catholic Church said Adolf Hitler was chosen of God. He says, surely Mein Kampf must also have been known to many of 30 million Roman Catholics in Germany, as well as to the leaders of the Roman Catholic Church, both there and in Rome. Yet the Roman Catholic Church hierarchy praised Hitler, sometimes in the most extravagant terms. Pope Pius XI told Vice Chancellor Fritz von Papen, himself a leading Roman Catholic, quote, how pleased he was that the German government now had at its head a man uncompromisingly opposed to communism, unquote. No word of reproof against the evil that Hitler had loosed upon Germany. Okay? What was the Third Reich? What was Adolf Hitler? What was the Nazi Party? What was the Second World War? A Roman Catholic, Holy Roman crusade against Jews and Protestants and other non-Roman Catholic sects like the Orthodox Serbs in Yugoslavia, and it was all cloaked as a war against communism. Now, Bishop Burning published a book stressing the link between Catholicism and patriotism and sent a copy to Hitler, quote, as a token of my devotion, unquote. Monsignor Hartz praised Hitler for having saved Germany from, quote, the poison of liberalism and the pest of communism, unquote. Now, I'll remind my listeners what liberalism is. Liberalism is a nondescript term that secretly means Roman Catholics who do not obey the Pope and who love Protestant liberties and want just to live and let live. They're not interested in following Roman Catholic canon law. They may go to the Roman Catholic Church. They may participate in the Mass and the other sacraments, so-called, of the Roman Catholic Church, but they're not true Catholics according to the papacy. And, of course, the word liberalism also applies in even greater terms to Protestantism, which has rejected both the spiritual and temporal power of the Pope and labeled him, as does the Bible and all of history, Antichrist. But it was all cloaked as a war against communism. Now, Catholic publicist Franz Tichenor praised, quote, the Führer gifted with genius, unquote, and declared that he had, quote, been sent by Providence, capital P, in order to achieve the fulfillment of Catholic social ideas, unquote. What do you suppose Catholic social ideas is? Catholic social idealism is the unity of church and state. The Roman Catholic Church becomes the state-sponsored church, and no other religion is tolerated. That's what Catholic social ideas means. Most German Catholics were in a state of euphoria after the 1933 Concordat between Hitler and the Vatican was signed. Catholic young men were ordered, quote, to raise their right arm in salute and to display the swastika flag. The Catholic youth organization Neue Deutsche Jugend called for the full and close cooperation between the totalitarian state and the totalitarian church, unquote. Now, what was the totalitarian state? Roman Catholic Nazi Germany. And what was the totalitarian church? The same one it's always been, the Roman Catholic Church. The German bishops together pledged their solidarity with National Socialism. Addressing a gathering of Catholic youth at the Cathedral of Trier, Bishop Bornwasser declared, quote, "With raised heads and firm step, we have entered the new Reich, and we are prepared to serve it with all the might of our body and soul," unquote. What is the Third Reich? An attempt to restore the Holy Roman Empire that had fallen around its papal foundations after the Protestant Reformation. So what must be destroyed? Much talk about the Jews, but it was to destroy Protestantism. And I'm telling you, the persecution against the Jews was simply to set the stage for a mass emigration of Jews to Israel, and to kill off any Jew that demanded that a modern nation state of Israel was not God's will. Two things were happening at the same time through Nazi Germany and World War II, preparing a mass exodus of Jewish Europeans to go to Israel, to flee to Israel for protection. An attempt to kill off every Jew that said it was not God's will for there to be a modern nation state of Israel, and to kill as many Protestants as possible. And a close examination of the history of World War II will make this apparent to anyone with an open mind. Now, Bishop Vogt Aitken, in a congratulatory telegram, promised Hitler that, quote, "Diocese and bishop will gladly participate in the building of the new Reich," unquote. All right? Diocese and bishop. Who is that? The Roman Catholic people, led by the bishops, will gladly participate in building the new Reich. It makes it pretty obvious that this establishment of the Third Reich was a primary objective of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, Cardinal Faulhaber, in a handwritten note to Hitler, expressed the wish, quote, "Coming from the bottom of our heart, may God preserve the Reich Chancellor for our people," unquote. A picture appeared in a German-American paper showing Vicar General Steinmann leading Catholic youth organizations in a parade past Hitler and returning the Führer's raised arms salute. And now it's appropriate to mention that the typical Hitler salute is simply a recreation of the old Roman salute. It's identical in every way, and now you know why. Continuing, he says, replying to the criticism from outraged American Catholics, Steinmann declared that, quote, "German Catholics did indeed regard the government of Adolf Hitler as a God-given authority, and that someday the world would, quote, gratefully acknowledge that Germany erected a bulwark against Bolshevism," unquote. What of Mein Kampf and the evil of Nazism? University of Massachusetts Associate Professor of Government Gunther Levy fled his native Germany as a boy of 15 in 1939. He returned in 1960 to spend years researching official files. Levy writes, in the Catholic Church in Nazi Germany, quote, "Pius XI, in 1933, called the Chancellor of the German Reich, that is Hitler, the first statesman who, together with the Pope, had clearly recognized the Bolshevik danger. Bishop Lattersdorfer praised the, quote, harmonious collaboration of church and state, that is the Roman Catholic Church and the Nazi state, through the Nazis, though the Nazis had already imprisoned many Roman Catholic priests and nuns for political reasons," unquote. Now, why did the Nazis exterminate so many Roman Catholic priests and nuns? Clearly because they were liberal. They wanted peace with Protestantism. They either secretly or outwardly opposed Nazism and opposed the Pope's Führer, Adolf Hitler. They opposed the concentration camps. They opposed the persecution of Jews and unchristian-like behavior, both by the church and the state. Rome simply killed her own people for opposing the church and for opposing Hitler and for opposing the Nazis. On March 29, 1936, this is still a quote, 45,453,691 Germans, or 99% of those entitled to vote, went to the polls. Of these, 44,461,278, or 98.8% of those voting, voiced their approval of Hitler's leadership. Within the quote, in brackets, it says the Catholic vote approving Hitler was virtually unanimous. So there you have an example of the Roman Catholic Church's power in politics. Every Roman Catholic voted according to the dictates of the bishops and the priests. Continuing the quote, it says, a joint pastoral letter from all the German bishops was read from the pulpits on January 3, 1937, stating that, quote, the German bishops consider it their duty to support the head of the German Reich by all those means which the Church has at its disposal. We must mobilize all the spiritual and moral forces of the Church in order to strengthen confidence in the Führer, unquote. Now, what are all those powers? What are all those means that are always at the disposal of the Roman Catholic Church? Force. That's openly stated in Roman Catholic papal encyclicals and bulls, that Rome has the divine right to use force to coerce cooperation with the Church and with the state when the state is subservient to the Church. Force, bloodshed, war, torture, inquisition, interrogation, persecution, denial of basic civil rights, imprisonment, confiscation of property, excommunication, eternal damnation, and even the denial of a Christian burial. Those are just some of the means by which the Church, means that the Church always has at its disposal to mobilize spiritual, that is religious, and moral, that is state forces of the Church in order to strengthen the confidence of the Führer. To read this quote without understanding anything about papal encyclicals or papal definitions for words, it may seem wicked enough, but when you understand what is really written here, it makes the hair stand on the back of your head. Now he says, by this time no one could have been ignorant of Adolf Hitler's ruthlessness or of his real goals. Yet Catholic leaders, like most Protestant clergy in Germany, continued to heap praise upon their fellow Catholic. Two books on Reich and Kirch, that is, Church and State, published with ecclesiastical permission, that is, by the permission of the Roman Catholic Church, called, quote, Deepening the Understanding of the Great Work of German Renewal, which the Führer has summoned us, the biggest spiritual task of contemporary German Catholicism, unquote. Karl Adam, world-renowned Catholic theologian, argued that National Socialism and Catholicism, far from being in conflict, quote, belong together as nature and grace, unquote, and that Adolf Hitler's Germany had found at last, quote, a true people's chancellor, unquote. So who were the true people of Germany? The Roman Catholics. The rest were not true people. they were animals. Okay? That's how Rome has always viewed non-Catholics. That's how Rome has always viewed those that she even describes as liberals. And that's why she's just as happy to kill her own as she is to kill a Protestant or a Jew or an Orthodox or anyone else who won't bow down and obey every single word the Pope utters. It says, a minority of brave men, both Catholics and Protestants, opposed Hitler, some openly, others in secret plots. A few voices were raised in public protest. One belonged to a priest, a Father Muckerman, who dared to express his amazement and consternation that, quote, despite the inhuman brutalities perpetrated in the concentration camps, despite the personal insults against individual princes of the Church, against the Holy Father and the entire Church, the bishops find words of appreciation for what, next to Bolshevism, is their worst enemy. Unquote. To answer an enigma. The enigma of Germany remains the enigma of Russia, China, Vietnam, Cuba, Haiti, Yugoslavia, South Africa, and the entire world of our day. On the other hand, it's not an enigma at all if one accepts the testimony of Scripture. We find the answer in Babel, a tower which has never ceased to be under construction. Only the location and outward form change from time to time, but the perverted ambition, impossible dream that it is, remains steadfast. The end result, the judgment of God that will come upon mankind, is foretold clearly in biblical prophecy. Make no mistake, we are hastening to that day. In the meantime, the woman who rides the beast, whose name is Mystery Babylon, has a key role to play. As a result, she will taste God's judgment before the rest of the world knows its full and awesome power as well. Unquote. Dave Hunt's telling it like it is. None of us should be unaware of what Mystery Babylon is. History drips with it. The Bible does likewise, and we need to call it what it is, renounce it, and walk away from it. Come out of her, my people. We'll be back right after these.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. If you wish to support Inquisition Update, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors the program. It's my privilege to be here, and I thank Brother Nicholas for seeing the value of the information and making sure the listeners have an opportunity to hear it. You know, the angel told John the Revelator, he said, "Come with me and I will show you the judgment of the great whore, the judgment of the Roman Catholic Church and this global Antichrist system that Rome has erected for the glory of the Antichrist, the Pope of Rome. What will be the end result?" Dave Hunt says the end result, the judgment of God, will come upon mankind. It is foretold clearly in biblical prophecy. Make no mistake, we are hastening to that day. In the meantime, the woman who rides the beast, whose name is Mystery Babylon the Great, has a key role to play. As a result, she will taste God's judgment before the rest of the world even knows its full and awesome power as well. I want my listeners to know who this woman is and how her power dictates virtually every aspect of our lives today. I don't want any of my listeners to be unaware. Now, Dave Hunt continues. He says, in his important analysis in 1940, Weyrich warned that Nazism was a religion that had infected Germany's youth. It was pagan worship of nature, yet its claim to be Christian deceived millions, as is happening in the United States today by the same means. That perversion surfaced in the twisted thinking of Nazi Minister of Propaganda Joseph Goebbels, who admired Christ, quote, as one of a long line of Aryan heroes, ranging from Wotan and Siegfried to Wagner and Hitler, unquote. The, quote, shell game switch, unquote, was echoed by Dr. Lee, head of the Nazi Labor Front. Quote, our faith is National Socialism, unquote. Hans Kerl, Nazi Minister of Church Affairs, furthered the lie that was embraced by the majority of both Catholics and Protestants. Quote, true Christianity is represented by the party. The Führer is the herald of a new revelation, unquote. New? Weyrich called Nazism a new a new paganism, and that it was. Actually, only the veneer was new, but underneath it was still Babel. John's vision of the woman on the beast makes that fact abundantly clear. Now he subtitles this next portion, Religion of Self-Effort. And I will just add the words as opposed to the free grace, the grace of Jesus Christ. Okay? This is the counterfeit. Religion of self-effort. God confounded the language of Babel's builders into numerous tongues so they couldn't understand one another and thus were scattered. But the proud religion of self-effort leading to deification of a master race persisted, evidenced by the ruins of similar towers called ziggurats, found throughout throughout that area of the world. None of the towers, however, attained great height with that day's primitive technology. Heaven was still beyond man's reach. So the ziggurats became occultic altars of every perversion. On their pinnacles, astrology began, with the worship of heavenly bodies, believed to have mystical power to control the destinies of men. Far from dying out, Babel's religion of self-effort was institutionalized in Babylon and throughout its vast empire. This is paganism, the perennial world religion that persists to this day. It lives on, not only among primitive peoples who worship nature spirits, but flourishes among university professors who attribute similar intelligence to nature's quote-unquote forces. Paganism has been characterized worldwide throughout the centuries by mysterious rituals celebrated around ornately carved and decorated altars atop structures such as pyramids that one finds from Egypt to Central and South America. Though warned of God through the prophets against this evil, Israel also succumbed to pagan seduction. This corruption of the truth he had taught them eventually brought God's judgment upon his chosen people. The Old Testament has many references to quote-unquote high places that were constructed in Israel. Violating the prohibition against, quote, going up by steps, unquote, to God's altar, they became the centers of Jewish idolatry. See Leviticus chapter 26, verse 30, Numbers chapter 22, verse 41, etc. At times of repentance and revival, these so-called high places, with their idols, were destroyed by godly kings and priests. But Israel never rid itself of this evil. Both Orthodox and Catholics, and even some Protestants, have embraced the same corruption by their stately structures, elevated and gilded altars, and ornate vestments and intricate liturgies, which presumably please God and help open the doors to heaven. The bricks and mortar which were involved remind us that Babel was not only a religious and political enterprise, but that it engaged the most advanced technology or science of its day. Today's science still represents an attempt to elevate man to godhood by conquering space, the atom, disease, and eventually death itself. Now this portion is entitled, Babylon is Still Alive and Well. At Babel, God scattered mankind and confounded their language so that they could not communicate their evil designs to one another. On Mars Hill in Athens, the Apostle Paul declared that God separates races and nations so that they could concentrate upon Him. See Acts chapter 17, verse 26 and 27. The consensus of opinion today is that we need just the opposite. The solution to mankind's ills will come about through unscrambling the languages and uniting all nations in scientific enterprises which will ultimately turn planet Earth into a paradise once again. Such was the declaration of a recent Lockheed Corporation ad in the Scientific American, featuring an illustration of the ancient Tower of Babel. Touting Lockheed's technological accomplishments, the ad boasted that its scientific advancements were, quote, undoing the Babel effect, unquote, by bringing mankind together and making it possible for all to speak one language. In other words, Lockheed was countering God, the one responsible for what it called the Babel effect. The Tower of Babel fills the official poster of the 12-nation United Europe, whose new currency even depicts a woman riding a beast. Circling above the unfinished tower are 12 stars. Unlike those on the American flag, however, these stars are upside down, thus forming the pentagram of classic occultism. The pentagram, with its two horns pointing upward and its beard downward, is also known as the Goat of Mendes, or Baphomet, a symbol of Satan. International Business Machines, IBM, has also used the artist's depiction of the Tower of Babel in some of its ads, with modern high-rise buildings protruding from the half-finished structure. Why this nostalgic return to what most people today dismiss as a myth? There seems to be an innate sympathy with Babel, a recognition that modern man is carrying on where Babel left off, and is pursuing the same ambition of achieving immortality by human effort. God scattered the builders of Babel, but today's determination is the opposite, to unite all nations into a new world order. God confounded the language, but today's technology is aimed at breaking down every language barrier. Soon there will be phones on the market which will allow English spoken into the receiver in Los Angeles to come out the other end in Tokyo as Japanese. Dare we suggest that something is wrong? Why not encourage and enjoy what intellect and talent can accomplish? Even God acknowledged the limitless bounds of human capabilities when he said, quote, "Whatever they imagine, they will be able to do. Whatever they imagine, they will be able to perform," unquote. God, however, had already declared that, quote, "the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth," unquote. See Genesis chapter 8, verse 21. Thus, human ingenuity, as God foresaw, would create ever-increasingly evil until the very survival of mankind would hang in the balance. Surely today's threats to survival have all come from scientific genius. Honesty would also force us to admit that the rise of urbanization, even in ancient times, has contributed to the escalating tide of evil that threatens to engulf our world today. John's vision indicates that Babylon, will be very much alive in the last days. Emblazoned across the forehead of the woman riding the beast are the words, "Mystery Babylon." That she represents revived paganism is clear. Most interesting of all, however, is the fact that she embodies paganized Christianity. The woman represents a worldwide religious system which is based in Rome and claims to be Christian, but which has its roots in Babel and Babylon. That conclusion will become unassailable as we examine further the vision John received. Chapter 6 of this book is entitled "A City on Seven Hills," and it begins with a quote from Revelation, chapter 17, verse 18 and 9. "The woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. A city on 7 hills. A woman rides the beast, and that woman is a city built on 7 hills that reigns over the kings of the earth." Was ever in all of history such a statement made? John immediately equates the reader's acceptance of this revelation with wisdom. We dare not pass over such a disclosure casually. It merits our careful and prayerful attention. Here is no mystical or allegorical language, but an unambiguous statement in plain words. Quote, "The woman is that great city," unquote. There's no justification for seeking some other hidden meaning. Yet books have been written and sermons preached insisting that, quote-unquote, Mystery Babylon is the United States. That's clearly not the case, for the United States is a country, not a city. One might justifiably refer to the United States as Sodom, considering the honor now given to homosexuals, or rather sodomites, correctly speaking. But it is definitely not the Babylon that John sees in this vision. The woman is a city. Furthermore, she is a city built she is a city built on 7 hills. That specification eliminates ancient Babylon. Only one city for more than 2,000 years has been known as the city on 7 hills. That city is Rome, Italy. The Catholic Encyclopedia states, this is from Rome's own encyclopedia, quote, "It is within the city of Rome, called the City of 7 Hills, that the entire area of Vatican State proper is now confined," unquote. There are, of course, other cities, such as Rio de Janeiro, that were also built on 7 hills. Therefore, John provides at least 7 more characteristics to limit the identification to Rome alone. We'll examine each one in detail in subsequent chapters. However, as a preview of where we are going, we will list them now and discuss each one briefly. As we shall see, there is only one city on the earth which, in both historical and contemporary perspective, passes every test John gives, including its identification as Mystery Babylon. That city is Rome, and more specifically, Vatican City. Even Catholic apologist Carl Keating admits that Rome has long been known as Babylon. Keating claims that Peter's statement, quote, "The church here in Babylon sends you her greeting," unquote, from 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 13, proves that Peter was writing from Rome. He explains further, quote, "Babylon is code word for Rome. It is used that way 6 times in the last book of the Bible. 4 of the 6 are in chapters 17 and 18, and in extra-biblical works such as Sibylline Oracles, the Apocalypse of Baruch, and 4 Esdras. Eusebius Pamphilius, writing about 303 AD, noted that, quote, "It is said that Peter's first epistle was composed at Rome itself, and that he himself indicates this, referring to the city figuratively as Babylon," unquote. As for the word mystery, that name imprinted on the woman's forehead is perfect designation for Vatican City. Mystery is the very heart of Roman Catholicism, from the words magisterium fidei, pronounced at the alleged transformation of the bread and wine into the literal body and blood and soul and divinity of Christ, to the enigmatic apparitions of Mary around the world. Every sacrament, from baptism to extreme unction, manifests the mysterious power which the faithful must believe. They must believe that the priest wields, but for which there is no visible evidence. Rome's New Catechism explains that liturgy, quote, "aims to initiate souls into the mystery of Christ." It's mystagogy, unquote. And that all of the church liturgy is, quote unquote, mystery. It's the mystery religion. It calls itself the mystery religion. Shall we argue with what Rome clearly admits? Who is the whore of Revelation chapter 17? The first thing we are told about the woman is that she is a whore. See Revelation 17:1. That earthly kings, quote, "have committed fornication," unquote, with her. Verse 2. And that, quote, "all the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication," unquote. See verse 3. Why would a city be called a whore and be accused of having committed fornication with kings? Such an indictment would never be made of London or Moscow or Paris or any other ordinary city. It wouldn't make sense. Fornication and adultery are used in the Bible in both the physical and the spiritual sense. Of Jerusalem, God said, "How is the faithful city become a harlot?" See Isaiah chapter 1, verse 21. Israel, whom God had set apart from all other peoples to be holy for his purposes, had entered into unholy, adulterous alliances with the idol-worshipping nations around about her. She had, quote, committed adultery with stones and with stocks, unquote, meaning idols. See Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 9. And, quote, with her idols they have committed adultery, unquote. See Ezekiel chapter 23, verse 37. The entire chapter of Ezekiel 16 explains Israel's spiritual adultery in detail, both with heathen nations and with their gods, as do many other passages in the Bible. There's no way that a city could engage in literal fleshly fornication. Thus, we can only conclude that John, like the prophets of the Old Testament, is using the term in its spiritual sense. The city, therefore, must claim a spiritual relationship with God. Otherwise, such an allegation would be meaningless. Though it is built on 7 hills, there would be no reason to accuse Rio de Janeiro of spiritual fornication. It makes no claim of having a special relationship with God. And though Jerusalem has that relationship, it cannot be the woman riding on the beast, for it is not built on 7 hills. Nor does it meet the other criteria by which this woman is to be identified. Against only one other city in history could a charge of fornication be leveled. That city is Rome, and more specifically, Vatican City. She claims to have been the worldwide headquarters of Christianity since its beginning, and maintains that claim to this day. Her Pope enthroned in Rome claims to be the exclusive representative of God, the Vicar of Christ. Rome is the headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church, and in that, too, she is unique. Numerous churches, of course, are headquartered in cities, but only one city is the headquarters of a church. The Mormon Church, for example, is headquartered in Salt Lake City, but there is so much more to Salt Lake City than the Mormon Church. Not so with Vatican City. It is the heartbeat of the Roman Catholic Church and nothing else. See, she is a spiritual entity that could very well be accused of spiritual fornication if she did not remain true to Christ. Now, what about this fornication with the kings of the earth? This portion is entitled, In Bed with the Rulers. You're going to find out why the government of the United States is so corrupt, that they don't seem to care about the will of the people. A government that was created of, by, and for the people is now of, by, and for somebody else. Not only does Rome's Pope call himself the Vicar of Christ, but the church he heads claims to be the one true church and the bride of Christ. Christ's bride, whose hope is to join her bridegroom in heaven, is to have no earthly ambitions. Yet the Vatican is obsessed with earthly enterprise, as history proves. And in furtherance of these goals, it has been, exactly as John foresaw in his vision, engaged in adulterous relationships with the kings of the earth. That fact is acknowledged even by Roman Catholic historians. Christ said to his disciples, quote, If ye were of the world would love his own. But because ye are not of the world, because I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. See John chapter 15, verse 19. The Catholic Church, however, is very much of this world. Her popes have built an unrivaled worldwide empire of property, wealth, and influence. Nor is empire building an abandoned feature of the past. We've already seen that Vatican Council II clearly states that the Roman Catholic Church today still ceaselessly seeks to bring under its control all mankind and all their goods. And that's exactly what they're doing. Popes have long claimed dominion over the world and its peoples. Pope Gregory XI's papal bull of 1372 in Sena Domini claimed papal dominion over the entire Christian world, secular and religious, and excommunicated all who failed to obey the popes and pay them taxes. In Siena was confirmed by subsequent popes in 1568, Pope Pius V swore that it was to remain an eternal law. The God of Rome has spoken, and the whole world wanders after this beast. We must swear off Roman Catholicism and ecumenism and return to Christ and Him only.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.